There's a particular reason Joel and I wanted to do what we just did, and maybe you'll understand it a little bit after I say a few more things. We hoped that all four families would be involved, but not everybody is excited about going up front, and some weren't here. But I want to share something in a minute that I think you'll see where I'm going. You know, in the Bible, I was told that there were more than 20 times in the Bible where it says to love one another or forgive one another or, do something for one another. And I thought, 20 times? Yeah, that's probably about right. The one another's are in the Bible quite a bit. Well, I decided to find out for myself, and I found 48 times, not 20. And so it's almost 50. And how many of those would you guess probably say love one another? It's about a third of them. And then there are other words that are similar, like care for one another, be kind to one another, or kindly affectionate to one another, and things like that. And or have compassion on one another. Those are very similar to loving one another. But loving one another, the way God intends church members to do, is a tie that binds. And some cultures are better at it than others. Like, for instance, Dean told me not to share this, but I told him I shared it anyway. 4 times in the Bible it says to greet one another or salute one another with a holy kiss. He said, no, don't share that one. Some cultures are fine with that. But, your white American Caucasian male, that's not macho enough. And when I was a kid, if some man tried to give me a kiss on the cheek, I probably would have smacked him. And then we got a French teacher who thought it was his duty to show us French culture. So we said, come on. Anyway, there's a lot of one another's. And I'd like you to go to Ephesians 4:32, because there's 2 of them in this one verse. And we're going to see more ties that bind. Ephesians 4:32. And be ye kind to one another. All right, be kind. Tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ's sake hath forgiven you. So more ties that bind. And I didn't find any that say encourage one another, at least they weren't translated that way. But I did find that the same Greek word was translated in different ways in 3 different places, like exhort one another, comfort one another. And when I looked up the word, it could have been encourage one another. And when I go to that, it reminds me of something I experienced before COVID. I had a church member who, he was in his mid-70s, and he had competed in senior games. And he was ranked nationally in the high jump, number 11 or something like that. And he was quite proud of that. But he told me, you're in good health. You should join senior games. Be a testimony to the health message. And I thought about it, and I said, well, I'm still pretty healthy. Maybe I can do something. I don't know. I used to run when I was young. But I decided to go watch. And I went to San Mateo, just below San Francisco, one of the Bay Area senior games. And one thing that struck me the whole time I was there is how much encouragement I heard coming from everybody to everybody. It's like they all know when you get old like that, not everybody can just do this, so you go for it. And I told a couple of people, I was just there watching, I was thinking of doing it, and they're all giving me pep talks on how I have to. You got to do it. You'll feel great. And everybody cheered for everybody. And then there was, I can't remember if it was a 3K or 5K race. There weren't very many contestants. See, if there's a lot of contestants, you only have to run heats in your age group. And that's preferable if you're worried about looking bad. Well, they didn't have very many contestants for this race. And there was one lady over 75 in it. And most of the other people were considerably younger than her. And I watched that race go. I mean, it wasn't long before everyone else in the race lapped her. And it wasn't too long before they lapped her again. And then they're all finishing the race. And she has 2 laps to run all by herself. And she was going slow. And I'm thinking, this is going to take forever. Well, when she came around after her first lap by herself, everyone's cheering for her. Someone was standing up saying, "You go, girl, you go. Don't you ever quit." And they're going on like this. And "You got it." And they're clapping for her, and she keeps going. And then she comes around. It felt like a long time. She came around. She got a standing ovation. And I remember sitting there saying, I've never had church members encourage me like that. Now I know sporting events or you shout out. When I worked at Great Lakes Adventist Academy, kids actually did that. They would yell out at kids that are going up front. And I'm thinking, that's irreverent. No, we're encouraging them. I couldn't quite get used to that in a chapel, But there's something to it because we're not very intentional about encouraging one another. We just kind of take for granted and say a little bit here and there, and we don't realize how much it matters to people to get more encouragement than we're giving. Now, I'm going to give you for an instance because I went and did senior games 2 weeks ago, and I kind of experienced what the old lady experienced. Kind of. Not quite that bad, but, and I really wanted to go down there and do some amazing things, but I kept pulling my hamstrings, so I had to stop. I couldn't train. And then I thought, man, this is going to be hard. I don't really want to go and look bad. And it's also during the International Food Festival. I don't want to miss the International Food Festival, so I almost didn't go. I was in a little bit of condition, but not enough to do anything special. And a couple of days before it was time to go, an email came to me, showed me what heat I was going to be in the 400. And I said, oh, that's not going to look good. They put all the 80-year-olds in one heat and all the 70-year-olds in one heat. And then they had a bunch of 50-year-olds and a few 60-year-olds. And so they put the 60-year-olds in with the 50-year-olds. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get swamped. I'm going to get run off that track. In fact, even when I was there, I contemplated not joining it. I just do the 800 because I knew the 800, they were mixing all the age groups. So in that one, I knew I wouldn't come in last. But I'm thinking, I'm going to go in a heat that I already know I'm going to come in last. And I just hope it's not too embarrassing. Well, it was embarrassing. I came into that curve at the other end. When I came into the curve, nobody was left in it. When I came out of the curve, I think I saw 2 people finishing 180 yards away. And I came running down that track, and I'm like, they're all waiting for me. And they just started cheering. I didn't get a standing ovation because I wasn't 2 laps behind. I was only 80 yards behind on a 400-yard race. But I came down, and they were cheering for me. They were telling me to finish strong and all that. And I thought, yeah, that's good. That's the only reason I even dared come today, because I know the encouraging spirit that's here. 10 times more encouraging than the church. Am I allowed to say that? So imagine my shock and chagrin when I found out a little while later that I came in second in my age group. I got a silver medal for that. I don't feel like I deserved anything, but when I got that silver medal, I said, man, I love senior games. Even though I didn't feel like I deserved a medal, it still was encouraging. People cheer for you when you get it, and I'm like, yikes. I'm glad I came, I guess. So, all this one another, the Bible doesn't say cheer for one another, but it does say encourage one another. And it says to pray for one another. That's another tie that binds. James 5:16 says pray for one another. And I referred to Galatians 6:2 that says bear one another's burdens. The word bear there is from a Greek word that means to sustain, to take up, and it has the idea of removal. It isn't bearing others' burdens isn't just praying for them, it's figuring out a way to remove the burden. It's more active than just, oh, sorry, I'm here for you. So, should the ordinance of humility be a tie that binds our hearts together? Galatians 5:13 says, serve one another. Well, that sounds a little more like the ordinance of humility, right? Because we serve one another. 1 Peter 5:5 says, be subject to one another. In other words, submit self to. So, we don't think of it this way, but when we get down on our hands and feet, and hands and knees, and we wash someone's feet, aren't we in a subordinate position? We're serving them. We're so used to it, we don't think of it that way. But Jesus' disciples didn't like him doing that, because they understood that serving one another as a servant, the word serve there comes from a Greek word that means slave. You really want to serve somebody that deeply? And then John 13:14, here's another one of one another's. We ought to wash one another's feet. And then Romans 12:10 says, and honor, preferring one another. And I'd like to go to Philippians 2 and read verse 3. It says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. King James says strife or vainglory. But in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than themselves. And verse 5 says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So let us proceed to the washing of feet with this mindset to serve one another and to be in unity. And I'm going to suggest that the person you serve, you try to think of at least something encouraging to say to each other. Let's make it a time of encouragement as well as serving.